advocacy group Accountability Now says it's concerned that the NPA doesn't have the capacity to handle PPE corruption cases. Now, the SIU has referred 386 people to the NPA for prosecution following an 18-month investigation into government's COVID-19 contracts. The prosecuting authority must now add these cases to its already heavy workload, while it barely copes with state capture-related work as well. Now, Accountability Now Director Advocate Paul Hoffman joins us for more on this story. Advocate Hoffman, it's great to have you with us on the program. Thanks so much for your time. And I suppose the big question, throughout the state capture inquiry, the release of the first part of the state capture report, and now this SIU report into PPE corruption, people are asking how many of the people implicated in these cases are going to get away, and how many will be brought to book?
Yes, those are both good questions. Good morning, Michelle. Thanks for the opportunity. And good morning to your viewers as well. The answer is that none of them should get away, and all of them should be held to account, be made to pay back the money, and to be issued with their orange overalls at the end of a fair trial. Whether that's going to happen is another question entirely. You'll remember that when the Scorpions were closed down in 2009, they had over 500 personnel. After they were closed down, investigative work into corruption was given to the Hawks. And the Hawks have proved inadequate to the task. In fact, the Hawks have not landed a single big fish in their entire existence. As far as the prosecutorial work is concerned, what happened to the NPA during the Zuma years is, and this is in the words of its own leadership, it was hollowed out, it did not get new recruits, and it is infested, as we speak this morning, it is infested with saboteurs who are there to see to it that those involved in state capture, and PPE is just a continuation, PPE irregularities are just a continuation of the perversion of the public procurement system for the benefit of the nefarious persons involved in the irregular procurements that the SIU has now reported on.
Yeah.
Without any proper investigation by the police, the hands of the National Prosecuting Authority are tied because there's no docket to take to court. And President Ramaphosa recognized that this was a problem, and he created, shortly after he became president, he created a temporary stopgap measure, probably not entirely constitutional, but it's called the Investigating Directorate, and it is required to look into this type of offense. The trouble is that the Investigating Directorate has 17 permanent members, and it has about 100 other people seconded to it. So it is about a fifth of the size of the Scorpions, who were effective and efficient at dealing with the type of corruption that we see in the irregular PPE procurements. So I'm afraid that unless and until there is radical reform of the criminal justice administration, we are going to continue to see that none of the money is recovered, that none of the guilty persons are held to account, and that none of the orange overalls find their way onto the backs of those who deserve to have them.
I mean, we just need to cast our minds back, don't we, to the kind of fear that the Scorpions evoked when we thought about cases of corruption, and when we knew that the Scorpions were on your tail. It was time to really just buck up. Our anti-corruption machinery, as you say, since the disbandment of the Scorpions, not up to scratch, that's putting it mildly. How much of this is at the door of Parliament and its failure to pass the kind of legislation that we need to have a well-resourced, trained, specialized unit dealing with the scourge of corruption in our country?
There's only one institution in South Africa that can take the steps necessary for the reform required to become the reality. At the end of the second Glenister case, when the constitutionality of the Hawks was challenged, the majority judgment is very clear. In fact, it's been called loud and clear, that it was up to Parliament to pass the necessary remedial legislation, because the first version of the Hawks didn't cut it constitutionally. So the Parliament was ordered by the highest court in the land to pass remedial legislation so that adequately independent, effective and efficient anti-corruption machinery would be put in place. But unfortunately, at that time, Parliament was under the thumb of a man called Jacob Zuma, and it did the barest minimum, still didn't comply. And the later legislation is really partly the product of a Parliament captured by Jacob Zuma and the work of the court. That is not what is actually required. What is required is proper constitutional compliance with the five main criteria that have been laid down by our highest court and have never been put into practice by Parliament. So it is Parliament's fault, because only Parliament can pass the necessary remedial legislation. Parliament has had draft legislation in front of it since August last year. So has the Cabinet. Nothing has been done about it, and something needs to be done about it urgently if we are going to get on top of the consequences of the irregular PPE procurements and indeed the consequences of state capital.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about Parliament, and of course Parliament's watchdog Scopa is in the news now. It's given the President 10 days to respond to that leaked audio clip where Cyril Ramaphosa is talking about state funding used for party political activities. You know, how important is this issue in the context that you and I are talking about now, this corruption-riddled landscape that we're faced with in South Africa, where it does appear that, at least according to this audio recording, and perhaps it's been in the headlines for some time as well, but that party activities are funded from state coffers. This line between party and state, which on the face of it, even the President himself can't differentiate from.
Yes, I'm afraid the President is going to have to do a lot of answering, not only to Scopa, but also to the Public Protector, who is legally charged with being the policeman, if you like, or the policewoman of the executive ethics. But he also has to explain to the nation and to the prosecuting authorities and perhaps the Hawks why it is that he did not report what he says on that tape he knows about the ANC. And it is the only party that uses public funds to finance its campaigning, its activities. It's obviously illegal for a political party, which is a private organization, to just use public funds to bus people around, as he says in the tape, and to finance even internal campaigns. We all know the story of the grabber that was bought for the purpose of financing activities at Nasrec, when the question was who is going to lead the ANC, never mind who is going to lead the country.
Yeah. This
goes back a very long way. You'll recall that Andrew Feinstein told the world in his book After the Party that, and he was an ANC MP, that the 1999 election campaign of the ANC was paid for out of the bribes that were exacted in the arms deals. We know from the British Parliament that British Aerospace, which was responsible for the biggest of the arms deals, paid 112 million pounds, not rands, pounds, in bribes. We also know that Hitachi Power Africa was created as a partnership between Hitachi and the ANC through its investment arm Chancellor House. And Professor William Gumede says that over 3 billion rand was made by the ANC out of that deal, which was clearly illegal. You cannot have a political party involved in the procurement of boilers for Medupi and Kasuli. And the ANC, having made over 3 billion rand out of it, Hitachi got dragged to court in the United States of America and had to pay a multi-million-dollar fine for going into that deal because the Americans said that it was irregular for Eskom to wear 2 different hats.
I think, Advocate Paul Hoffman, I mean, what you're describing to us is so incredibly disturbing because it's not just, the aim of our interview was to talk about the effects of this SIU report and PPE corruption and perhaps what it means for our moral compass as a country, and what you're describing, of course, going back decades long. Unfortunately, we're out of time this morning, Advocate Hoffman, but let me thank you for your time this morning, giving us some interesting and valuable perspective there. He's the Director of Accountability Now.